Hey guys, this is Tapan Sharma here, and I'm back with a tutorial series. And in this series, we are gonna be implementing some awesome and feature-rich data tables using Laravel and Livewire. So this is basically the combined version of all the different video tutorials that I've currently recently uploaded in my channel. So what I did was I actually combined all of the different tutorials, different sections or different modules of my videos, and then I just compiled them all into a single video so that you can get all the information in a single video. And so let's talk about what we are going to be implementing in this session, in this tutorial. So the first feature that we'll be implementing is the pagination feature. As you can see, we are without any page reloads, the data are, we can actually implement the per page pagination of how many data we want to show. And yes, this is the pagination feature that we are implementing. So without any page reloads, the data are paginated. The second feature that we'll be implementing is live search feature. So we can search multiple columns. So if I type in miss, as you can see, it is searching through the name. And if I type in BER, then you can see it is searching through the email. And if I type in 835, then it is searching through the address. And if I type in +1, then we should see all the phone numbers starting with the +1. And another awesome feature is these search results are also paginated. So the records only with +1 are displayed here and also on the next page. So as you can see, the results that are displayed here are also paginated. So this is the feature. This is also one of the awesome features that we'll be implementing here. And we are also searching through the relationships. So each student belongs to a class and section. So we'll be implementing the relationship searching as well in this tutorial series. And another feature that we'll be implementing is filtering through class and section as well. So multi-level filtering. So you can apply this feature on any other use case that you like, or if you want to implement it. So if I select class 1 here, then only the students belonging to class 1 are displayed here. So filtering the data by class and also section. So if I select class 1, then these sections that belong to class 1 are displayed here. So section A and B. So if I select section A, then we don't have any section belonging to class. We don't have any students that belong to section A. And if I select section B, then also we don't get any video results. Okay, maybe we don't have that. Okay, we are on the page 2. That's why it was not working. So we also have the filtering feature here. So filtering the students by class and section. So multi-level filtering. So if I select class 1 and also select section A, then all the students belonging to class 1 and section A are only displayed here. So we'll be implementing this feature as well. And this is the dependent drop. So depending on the class, the sections are also displayed. So this is another feature that we'll be implementing, and we'll be also implementing deleting single record. So if I click on delete and OK, then we get a confirmation message. And if I click on cancel, nothing's gonna happen. And if I click on OK, then we should see that record deleted. And okay, one another thing that we'll be implementing, and last and the awesome feature that we'll be implementing, is selecting multiple records from our data table. So we have these checkboxes here. So as soon as I start selecting these records, then we'll see this checkbox here with the check of the record, with the count of the records that we are selecting, and then we can export these data to Excel file, or we can also delete this. So if I select export, and we also get a confirmation message, and if I click on OK, then we should see a file being downloaded here, as you can see. So this feature is working as well. And also we are going to implement one more feature, that is we'll also be talking about the performance. So eliminating the duplicate queries that are executed. So we'll also be talking about eager loading, other features that will help us to improve the performance of our app. And we also have this checkbox here. So if I select this checkbox, then you can see that you have selected 9 items, and we are filtering here. I think, okay, we don't have any filtration. But okay, let's reload our browser. Then you can see you are currently selecting 10 items. Do you want to select all 39? And if I click on select all, then we select all of the 39 items. And now what we can do is we can delete or export this data as well. So these are the features that we'll be implementing in this series, in this tutorial session. So if you like the content, do like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay updated about the future releases. And I'll be posting more Laravel related tutorials in the future as well. So stay tuned for that. And without any further details, let's get started. So in this video, we'll be implementing 2 features. One of them is the pagination. So this will be real-time pagination using Livewire. And the another one is improving the performance of our application. As you can see here, we are executing 23 queries in which 20 of them are duplicated. So we don't want the duplicate, we don't want to run the duplicate queries again and again, which will probably decrease the performance of our application. So in this video, we'll be talking about a feature called eager loading in Laravel, and also perform the pagination using Livewire. So let's get started. So in this video, we'll be talking about implementing pagination using Livewire, and also updating the pagination values by selecting it from the drop-down. So the amount number of data that we want to show on a single page, that is 10, 20 or 30, and also changing this to make it real time using Laravel Livewire. So let's get started. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a Livewire component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component called students. So PHP artisan Livewire make students, and hit enter. So the component has been created, Livewire students.blade.php. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the value from our students view file, so which is displaying all the table values and all these markups. I'm just gonna copy it from here, select everything up to here, cut that, and include that component, Livewire component here. Students, save that, and go to our Livewire students blade file and paste that here. And also make sure to include a parent diff component before defining all the other markups, otherwise Livewire will give an error, or it will not work properly. So a parent diff component is a must. So save that, and you also need to go to our main Livewire component, which is located in our app http Livewire and students, and we also need to fetch the students here. So students is student, okay, not all, we are paginating here. So paginate 10, and classes all. Save that, and these values will all be automatically be available in our blade file. And we also need to go to our controllers, student controller, and let's just comment these 2 values and also remove this part. And now everything should work as usual. So reload our page, and everything is working fine. And the only thing that we have changed is we have now separated our data table into a separate component, into a separate Livewire component, and now we can perform everything related to Livewire in our data tables. So our first step is to perform the pagination, but right now it is whenever we go to page 2, our page is reloading. So we don't want to make that happen. We want to change the table in real time using Livewire. So for that, what we need to do is we need to go to our students Livewire component and use with pagination, and by defining only this trait that is used with pagination, our paginations now will work in real time. So now let's go and reload our page, and okay, there's a problem here. Let me just undo that and go and reload. It's working fine, but if I use it with pagination, then it's giving an error. Okay, I think I have, and reload the page. Okay, let me go to my app service provider and comment this part, and now reload the page. Okay, still not working. Okay, let's leave it like that. Okay, now if I click on next, as you can see, our page is not reloading, and the pages and the data is updating in real time. So that is the power of Livewire, as you can see. So this is Livewire in action. Okay, now our next step is to change this value is to fetch the number of data depending on this drop down. So if we select 20, we should fetch 20 data at a time. So how do you do that? So for that, we need to go to our students.blade.php Livewire component, and what we can do is we can call the wire model property here and model it with a property called paginate. So we haven't defined this property yet, so let me save the page and go to our students component and define a property called paginate and set a value of 10 by default. And in order to implement this value, what we need to do is we need to go to our paginate function and call this paginate. Okay, this will do the work that we want to do. So since we are wire modeling it here, so wire model the paginate value, and also we are calling that function here. Okay, let me just show one more thing. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna first display this paginate value here, and I'll just undo this value and then go and reload our page. So now we have a value of 10 and the value is displayed here, and if I change that to 20, the value is changed to 20, and if I change it to 30, the value changes to 30. So this paginate property value is changing in real time using Livewire, as you can see in this. So this is the paginate value that is changing using the wire model property. So now I'm gonna assign that property to our paginate value. So this paginate, and now if we go and reload our page, and let me also remove this 10 value here, students, comment that and reload our page. So now we are only fetching 10 values, and if I change that to 20, okay, showing our 40 results. So we have some problem here. Value equal to 20, wire model paginate. What kind of problem is this? Okay, we are at page 3 now. Okay, now it is working fine. So if I change that to 20, now we are fetching 20 values, and so as you can see here, showing 1 to 20 or 40 results. And if I change that to 30, now we are displaying 30 values, so showing 1 of 30 or 40 results. So our pagination is working fine. So our next task in this session is to improve the performance of our application. As you can see here, what I've done is I have opened up my debug bar, and let me just reload this page. We are only displaying 10 records by default, and if we take a look at our debug bar, what we can see is we are actually running 23 queries, and we are using 34 model instances. And let's also check out the execution time. So in order to execute 23 queries, it takes around 20 milliseconds, and also the 20 of the queries that are executed are duplicated. So we don't want this. We want the queries to be as unique as possible and decrease the amount of duplicate queries. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a concept called eager loading using eager loading in Laravel. So with eager loading, what we can do is we can while we are fetching a certain model, what we can do is we can actually fetch all the relationship that the model has. So like if a book belongs to a certain author, so if the book belongs to a certain author, that what we can do with eager loading is that while we are loading that book, we can also load the author of that specific book. So this is called eager loading. So while we are fetching that book, we are also fetching that certain author of that book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Visual Studio Code students.php. So this is our Livewire component. So we are fetching all the students, and what I've done is I have also defined the relationship for our class and section. So student belongs to a certain class and a certain section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my student model, and I'm going to eager load the sections and the class for this student model. So in order to fetch multiple relationship, what we can do is we can do that using the array. We can pass an array and pass multiple relationship values. So we want to fetch the class and the section of a certain student. So we are fetching all the students along with their class and sections. So now let me just go and reload the page here. So notice the change in the queries tab and the queries execution time. So it is 20.28 milliseconds, and the number of queries that are executed are 23, and 20 of them are duplicated. So I'll just reload the page, and as you can see, the queries have decreased from 23 to 5, and the query execution time has also drastically decreased from 20 milliseconds to around 7 milliseconds. So this is the power of eager loading in Laravel. So using eager loading, what we can do is we can prefetch all the relationship that the model belongs to or has, and then we can solve the problem of n+1 query problem. It is also mentioned here, so we can eliminate the problem of n+1 query problem. So this concept is not necessarily needed if you have a small application using which has around thousands of records. But if you have a large amount of data and you need to fetch a large amount of data, so for that case we should care about the performance, and in that case eager loading is a must. And so this probably improves the performance of our application and also makes a less number of queries to the server. So I hope you like this video. So in this video we talked about pagination using Laravel Livewire, and also talked about how we can drastically improve the performance of our application using the concept of eager loading. So this much for this video, and in the next video we'll be talking about implementing bulk delete functionality using Livewire. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next one. So in our previous video we implemented the pagination feature using Livewire, and in this video we are going to be implementing the bulk delete feature using Livewire. And whenever I select these items or records from our data table, then we are going to show a checkbox and also show the count of the records that we have selected. And then when the user clicks on delete, then we want to show them a confirmation dialog whether they want to delete the record or not. And then if the user clicks on OK, then we will delete those records and also show a confirmation message that the record was deleted. And we will also be implementing deleting single records using this delete button here. So without any further delays, let's get started. So we have a checkbox here, and we need to wire model this with a property. So let's go to our Visual Studio Code, and we have an input type object checkbox here, and we also need to set a value to it. So we'll have a value of the current loop value, that is the student ID. So it will have the value of student ID, and let's also wire model it with a property that we haven't defined yet. So we want to wire model it with a value with a property called checked, and let's save that. And now let's go to our students Livewire component, and don't worry about all these codes, because what I did was I accidentally deleted the tutorial that I already recorded, and that's why I'm re-recording it again. So we'll be implementing these in the future, so don't worry about that. And now what I'm gonna do is I'll be defining a property called checked here. So this is gonna be a type of array which is gonna store all the IDs that we'll be selecting from our checkboxes. And now since we have wire modeled it with the checked property, and if I go and display this in our view, so I'll just do a for each loop here. For each checked as item, I want to display that item to make sure that it is working fine, it is working properly. So let's go and reload our browser. And now if I select this value, then we should see the ID of this record. And as you can see, we have the ID of 1, probably 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. So now we have all the IDs of these selected records in an array. And what we can do now is we can delete those records using Livewire and Laravel. So let's go to, so since we are on our view file, okay, let me just remove this for each loop. And now whenever the user clicks on delete, okay, so whenever the user selects these records, then what we want to do is we want to show this button here. So we checked, and also show the count of the records that we have selected. So let's go to our view file, and we have that button right here. Okay, let's cut that and wrap that in an if condition. So if the value of checked is set, then I want to show this button. Let's also confirm whether this is working or not. Let's go and reload our browser, and now our button is not visible. So if I checked any one value, then the button appears here. So the if condition is also working fine, and we want to show the count of these selected records in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove this 2 value here, and then I want to show the count of the checked array here. Okay, let's save that and also reload our browser again. And now if I select one record, I should see 1. If I select 2, then I should see 2, 3, 4, and so on. So it's working fine. Now whenever I click on the delete, then I want to show a confirmation dialog that whether the user wants to delete these records or not. And then when the user clicks on OK, then I want to delete those records from our database. So how do we implement that? Well, it's quite easy. What I want to do here is whenever the user clicks on submit, okay, let's implement the onClick method here. So onClick, I want to show a confirm dialog which says okay, I think I should wrap that in a single quote. Are you sure you want to delete these records? And let's also pass an OR condition, and I will be executing a JavaScript function here, which is event.stop immediate propagation. So basically what it's gonna do is whenever the user clicks on So when the user sees this confirm button and when the user clicks on cancel, then what it's going to do is after the user clicks on cancel, then whatever we write after this code, that is if we have a function called wire submit and we want to delete the records, then what it's going to do is after the user clicks on cancel, then all the code after this won't be executed. So this event.stop immediate propagation is gonna implement that feature, and when the user clicks on OK, so when there is a true condition, true value received from this confirm value, then this function will be executed, and when there's a false value received from this function, then this function won't be executed. Okay, I hope you understand the concept. I'll save that and let's go and define this delete records function in our Livewire component. So here I'm going to define a function delete records, and we don't need any parameters here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to query, I'm going to store all the students value in a variable called students, and I want to query in the student table. So we have the student database, and we can use the query builder called where key. So if we pass in, so where key generally takes, not generally, but where key takes an array of IDs. So if we have an ID of 1, 2, and 3, so if I want to delete these records from the database, then what is going to do is, okay, let's also include the get condition here. So get builder, and what I want to do is I want to die dump the students here. Okay, so this is going to get all the students where the ID is 1, 2, and 3. So we are passing an array here in our where key builder. Let's save that and reload our browser. And now if I select, okay, we don't need to select it, but in order to see that button, we need to select any one record. And if I click on delete, then we'll see a confirmation dialog. If I click on cancel, nothing's gonna happen. And if I click on delete and OK, then we should see a die dump value where the records have the ID of 1, 2, and 3. And it's taking a bit of time. Okay, I think I implemented wire submit here, but it should be wire click. Okay, let's go and reload our browser again, and we should see that button, delete and OK. And now we see array of 3 items where the IDs are 1, 2, and 3. Okay, it's working fine as expected. And what I want to do here, what we are going to do here is we are going to pass that checked array here. So we have an array of checked property, so we want to pass that here, and we don't need the get property here. And what we can actually do is, I think we don't also need this students variable here. So student where key this checked, and then we want to delete these records. So this will work fine. And our next step is we want to reassign our checked array to an empty array, and then we also want to show a session to our user, a confirmation, a dialog to the user with an type of info where the message would be, let's save that. And now if we go and reload our browser once again, and I want to delete these 3 records which checked, I want to delete. Are you sure I want to delete these records? Click on OK, and we should see these records deleted, and we should also not see this button here, and we should see a confirmation dialog here. Click on OK, and as expected, everything worked fine. So our data was deleted. And our next feature I want to implement is deleting the single record here. So this is also quite easy. So we'll be implementing the same feature that like we implemented here. So the with checked, not the with checked, but when the user clicks on delete and showing the confirmation dialog. So I want to show a confirmation dialog whenever the user clicks on delete button here too. So let's go and define that. So in order to do that, let's go to our students.blade.php, and we have that table here, and we have the button. Whenever the user clicks on this button, what I want to do is I want to show the confirm dialog again with the message, are you sure, record, and let's also pass that or condition with the event dot stop immediate propagation. And now let's wire click with a function delete single record. So we haven't defined this function yet, and I also want to pass that ID, that record ID here, which is the student. Okay, so delete single record. Let's go and define that function here, students PHP component, and we'll be receiving the student ID here, student underscore ID, and to check whether it's working or not, let's also die dump, and then we'll be deleting that record later. Okay, let's reload our browser again, and now if I click on delete and click on cancel, nothing's gonna happen. If I click on delete again and click on OK, we should see the die dumped ID of that record. So now the only thing that we want to do is we want to find that record. So let's store it in a variable. So student, where I want to find with the student ID, and then delete that record. So I'm making a lot of typing mistakes, so that student is deleted. And now let's also a session flash message here that the record was deleted successfully. So this should work fine. Again, let's go and reload our browser, and if I click on delete and click on OK, then we should see a confirmation message, and this record should also be deleted. So click on OK, and as expected, it's working fine. So one last feature that I want to implement here is whenever I select these records, I want to show a primary color on these tables, on these table rows that are selected. So a different color for only the selected tables. So how do we implement that? Well, that feature is also kind of easy here. So let's go to our students.php function, students.php component, and define a function called is checked. So this is only gonna return a condition, true or false value, whether the record is checked or not. So we are gonna send ID, student ID here too, and only we are gonna check here is whether the student ID is in the checked array or not. So if that ID is in our checked array, then we will be returning true from here, and if it doesn't exist, then it will return false. So the way we can check that whether a certain value exists in an array is by calling the function inArray. So in here we can pass the student ID, and we want to check whether it exists in the checked array or not. Let's save that. Okay, this should work fine. And now let's go to our students.blade.php component, and I want to display a class of table primary. So if I apply a class of table primary here, notice the change in the color. So let's reload our table, reload our browser, and I want to display this color only on the selected rows. So let's apply a if condition here. This is checked, so we want to call the function is checked here, and then pass the student ID. So if this condition is true, so if the student ID exists in our checked array, then I want to apply that table primary. I can just paste that. So now what it's going to do is, if the checked array consists of our student ID. So this student ID, if it exists in our checked array, and if this condition is true, then I want to apply the table primary class here. So let's go to our browser, reload it, and now if I select a certain record, then this record's color changes to primary, and it's kind of a cool feature to implement. I like it. And if I go and delete these, then these records get deleted, and we got a confirmation message, and everything is working fine. So in our previous video, we implemented some features like the pagination and the bulk delete, and also deleting these single records. And in this video, we are going to be implementing this search functionality into in our data tables. So using this search input field, we can search through the multiple columns of the model, like the student name, email address, or phone number. And we'll also talk about how we can search through the relationships of a certain model. So first we'll be working on searching through the model's columns, different column fields like the name, email address, or phone number. So in order to implement that, let's go to our code, Visual Studio Code first. And so here I have the model, that is the input field. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wire model this to a property called, let's call it search. So this will be the search term, and I need to go to the students Livewire component, and I'm going to define a property here called search, and let's set that to empty by default. And now let's display that search term here. And if I go and reload our browser, okay, I need to reload the browser, and if I go and type something here, then you can see the search term being displayed here. So our wire model is working fine. And now let's implement this search functionality. So in order to implement the search functionality, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a feature in Laravel called scopes. So if you go and check out the documentation of Laravel, there are different kinds of scope. So we'll be using the local scopes here. So local scopes are generally a kind of a function which are defined on the model. So in our case, we have a student model. So we'll be defining a scope in our student model to search through the multiple columns. So the way we define a scope is by appending a scope term into our function. So if I'm defining a function, if we want to define a scope for the popular users, popular votes, where the votes is greater than 100, then we'll be naming that scope as scope and then popular. So scope followed by the function name, and it will receive the query that we are building through. So it will receive the query builder, and then we can perform the search operation from here. So now let's go to our student model and define a scope here. So we need to define it as a function, and the name that we are going to give it will be a search. So scope search, and then it will receive the query builder as the parameter, and also we are going to send the search term that we want to search through. So these are the two parameters that we'll be receiving, and let's wrap that inside a function. So query var function. So we'll be defining a function here. So all the var queries that we'll be defining inside this function will be run at once. Okay, I'll just implement it and explain it later. So it is going to receive the query here, and we also need to use the search term that we are searching through the multiple columns. And let's also go and check out the documentation. So utilizing a local scope. So now we are gonna query through our model. So we want to query where. Okay, let's first define the term. We want to name, let's just redefine the term. The term will be, we want to append the percentage sign. So we'll be searching like the term, just like we do in the normal search. So let's wrap that. So we are going to wrap that term with the percentage sign so that it will search, it will find the similar terms which resembles to this term in our database. So we are going to pass, so we want to search through multiple columns. So in this case, we want to search through the name, which is like the term, or where. So we, in order to search through multiple columns, we'll be appending or where. So or where the email is like this term, and we also want to search the phone number, which is like this term, and we also want to search the address, which is like this term. So this query is going to be returned from this function, which will be executed whenever we call this function, and we are going to call this function whenever we are fetching all the all the tables from our database. So now in order to implement this scope, so scope search, what we are going to do is we are going to go to our Livewire students Livewire component, and whenever we are fetching all the students, then we are going to call that search function. So remember, so notice how we are only calling this search function with the small s and not the whole function here. So we need to eliminate the scope part and only call this search part. Okay, let's save that, and here we are gonna pass this search term, so the term that we have modeled it with. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna pass it inside a function. So the trim function, basically what it's gonna do is it is gonna remove all the white spaces from our term, from our search term. So this search, and now our search functionality is gonna properly work. So let's go and check our data table and reload. And now whatever I type in here, so if I type in +1, then it's gonna return all the phone numbers where the value consists of +1. So +1, +1, +1, +1. So our search functionality is working fine here. And if I type 1629, which is inside an address field, so that should also work fine. 1629. So we have only one value is returned. So it is also searching through the address field, address column. And if I search for nocon, so which is on an email, to check whether it is working or not, and only one value is returned, so nocon @example.com. so this function is also working fine. So that is, it is also searching through the email. And lastly, if I search for professor, so all the values consisting of this term professor are returned. So it is working fine here. And one more feature about Livewire I want to talk about is the debouncing the input. So what I want to do here is, after every 500 milliseconds duration, so by default it is set to 150 milliseconds. So after every 150 milliseconds, what Livewire is going to do is it is going to make a request to our server at an interval of 150 milliseconds. So we can change that to either 1 second or 2 seconds or 500 milliseconds. And we also can apply the lazy updating, but in this example I want to change that to 500 milliseconds. So after every 500 milliseconds, Livewire is going to send a request to our server, so which will drastically decrease the request that our client is going to send to the server. So wire model.debounce.500 milliseconds. So let's save that and go and check our database or check our table. and if I type in +1, and after 500 milliseconds it is going to send the request. And again, if I type in space and then a comma and then a bracket 702, so this is gonna drastically reduce the amount of requests that our client sends to the server. Okay, so up till now we have achieved searching through multiple columns of a certain model, like searching the name, email, address, or phone number. So but what if you want to search through their relationships, like searching the class and sections of section which are relationship which belongs to a certain class? So student model belongs to a certain class and section. So we how do you search through the relationships using Livewire? So the concept is used here will be using Laravel, but we'll be making it real time using Livewire. So let's discuss how we can achieve that. So let's go to our student model, and first what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the documentation of how we can search through the relation. So we have the section here, querying relations. So we can do that using the where has, where it was, okay, querying relationship existence. So this is checking whether it has or not, and we are gonna use the where has query builder here. So where has takes two parameters. First is the name of the relationship, like if a certain post has comments, then we are gonna pass the relationship name here, and the second argument is gonna be the function which is gonna pass the query and also the term, and then we'll be searching through the comment model where the content is like code. So this is the example that is shown here. So let's go and implement that in our model, in our student model. So we are going to query the or where has query builder here, because we also want to search through the names, email address along with the relationship name here. So or where has, and the name of our relationship is class, as you can see here, class, and the second parameter is gonna be the function, and we need to pass the query builder here, so query, and we also want to use the term, the search term, so we need to also pass that use term, and let's also define the curly braces. And now we are gonna search through our class model. So query where, so we have in our class model we have a field called name, so we want to search the names of class. The name is like our search term, so this is going to be returned. And we also want to search through the sections, so we can append that here again, or where has, and the name of our relationship is section, and we need to pass the function along with the query, and we also need to use the term in order to search through the relation. Let's grab that in a curly brace, and then we want to search the names of the section. So we have defined it as name, where the name is like our search term. Let's save that, and let's go and reload our Datatable, our browser. So now if I search for class 2, only the classes with this name, class 2, should be returned, and yes, it is working fine. If I search for class 3, then only the search term with the value of class 3, where the class is class 3, are returned, as you can see. And if I search for class 1, which I don't have any, so we should see it empty. Okay, it's working fine. Let's also check it for section. So we have section B, so only the term containing the section B will be returned here. So it is working till now. Section C, okay, we don't have any section C here. If we search for section A, so we do have the section A. Okay, So in this video, we discuss about how we can search through a single model's multiple columns like the student name, email, address, phone number, and we can append multiple columns using this method. So we can append or where columns or where query builder into our model. So if we have multiple columns, then we can append those using this or where. And we also talked about how we can query the relationships of a certain model like the class and section using the or where has query builder. So it takes two parameters. The first is the relationship name and the second is the function that we need to pass through it, and then we'll be querying their database. So we can also implement multiple searching here if you only want to implement name, or we can also query through their another column appending the or where method here like we did here. So in this way we can achieve all the types of functionality using the query builders. And let me also repeat the feature that we have implemented here, the scope section here. So we are defining a scope with the name of search, and we are redefining the term, appending it with percentage sign. So it is going to search the term relating to this term. So percentage is going to match it up with the characters, and then we are wrapping our query inside a function and searching all of these at once. So what it's going to do is it is going to chunk all these results and then pass it from here. So it is going to return all of these at once. It is going to execute all of these queries at once because we are wrapping it inside a function. So I hope you understand. So in this we also talked about the scope, local scopes, defining the scopes, and then searching through multiple columns. So I hope you understand the features that we have implemented in this video, and if you have any questions or confusions, then you can post a comment in the video and I'll try to answer it if I can. So in our previous video we discussed about how we can search through multiple columns and also searching the relationships of the model. And in this video we are going to be implementing the filter functionality. So whenever I click on class 1, then only the class containing the value of class 1 should be displayed here, and if I select on class 2, then only the classes where the value is class 2 should be selected. So this way we'll be implementing this search functionality using Laravel Livewire. So in order to do that, let's go to our Visual Studio Code and go to our students.blade.php component, and what I've done is I am querying all the classes from our database. So for each classes as item, what I'm doing here is I'm just displaying all these values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire model this select tag here with a property called selected class, which I haven't defined yet. So selected class, and this value will be assigned as the ID of the certain class. So we have a value of item ID. So whenever I select class 1, then this selected class value is going to be set to 1. If I set it to 2, then this class property is going to be set to 2. So in that way the wire model property works. So let me just save that and go to our students.php Livewire component and define a property called selected class. So public function selected class, and let's keep it null. Okay, not function. Public selected class is going to be null by default. So we have defined this property, and if I go to our students.blade.php and let me just display that selected class property here, save that and go to our browser and reload. And if I select class 1, then we should see the value of 1 because the class 1 has the ID of 1. And if I select class 2, then it should be 2. And if I select class 3, that should be class 3. So our wire model property is working fine. Let me just remove that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the query builder of Laravel. So if I go and search for when, so we have a query, we have a feature called conditional clauses in Livewire. Okay, not Livewire, Laravel. So whenever a certain value is true, so if a certain value called role is true, then we want to execute this function. So we are going to use this property to search through the classes. So whenever our selected class property is set, then we want to search through, then we want to perform the query where the query's class ID is equal to our selected class ID, and in that way we'll be achieving our functionality. So let's go to our students.php file, and okay, not students.php but our student.php model. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run the function here. Okay, not here. Now students.php model, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to append that when query here. So when our this selected class is property is set, then I want to run a query, and we also need to pass the query builder here. Okay, we need to remove that. So we want to search through the query where the class ID is our selected class ID. Let's save that. And okay, we need to keep that here, and everything should work fine now. So what we are basically doing is we are executing conditional clauses here. So if this value is true, so if this value is set, then we are going to execute this query. So if we have a value of suppose we have a value of ID of 1, then we are querying our database where the class ID is 1. So it's going to return all the values where the class ID. So it's going to return all the students where the class ID is 1, and if it is set to 2, then it is going to return all the students where the class ID is 2. So let's save that and go to our browser and reload. So now we don't have anything set, so it is actually displaying everything. And if I go and click on class 1, then it should be nothing should be displayed because we don't have any student which belong to class 1. So we see that so it is working as expected. And if I click on class 2, then we should only see the students which belong to class 2. If I click on class 3, it should work as expected, and class 4 should also work as expected. So what if you want to go further? What if you want to go a step further and also implement that filter functionality along with the sections as well? So if I click on class 1, then I should also see the sections of this class 1, and then we perform filtering from the sections as well. So how do we do that? Okay, let's take this feature a step further, and let's also implement the functionality of filtering the students by sections. So up till now we are filtering the students by classes. So we want to implement a feature where if I select class 1, then I want to see the sections that belong to class 1, and then whenever I select section A, then I only want to see the student that belongs to class 1 and section A. So let's define that feature. So let's implement that functionality. So in order to do that, let's go to the code editor, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a function again, not function, a property that will be selected. Okay, let's define a property called sections, and let's make it null by default. And whenever this property changes, so I want to fetch all the sections which belong to a certain class. So if the selected class value is 1, then I want to fetch all the sections which belong to class 1. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to use a property called Lifecycle hook in Livewire. So whenever a certain property changes, then we want to call that function, and that function is called the updated lifecycle hook. So we need to append a updated function, and along with the property name. In this case, we want to check for we want to monitor the selected class property. So whenever this class changes, this value changes, then we want to call that function and then fetch all the sections that belong to this selected class. So the way we define that property, it will be in this way. So if we have a property called selected class, then we will append that property name here, and whatever the property value changes to, that we'll be receiving as a parameter in this function. So if the class ID changes to 2, then we'll be receiving that value in our function as a property. So now what we want to do is we want to set the sections value to section where the class ID is equal to this class ID, and then we want to get the values of this class ID. Okay, and we are setting that to this sections. So now we have access to all these sections, sections as a property, and then now we can loop through each of these in our blade file. So now I have defined a tag for selecting the sections. So what I'm going to do here is, if the property of the selected class is set, that is this class, so whenever this class has certain value like 1, 2 or 3, then I want to display this part, that is this drop down. I want to display this drop down. So we need to wrap that in an if condition. So if the selected class is not equal to 0, or okay, it's not or, it should be and, I think. Okay, let's keep it as and we'll check whether it works or not. And if the selected class is not null, then we want to show the drop down. Okay, and let's give an option of select a section, and we want to loop through each of the sections here. So for each sections as item, I want to display the option, and the option value will be the ID, and we want to display the name of the section. So in this case, items name, and I hope everything is fine here. So let's go to our browser and reload. And now if I select class 1, then I should see section A and B. So we have a drop down here. So select a section A or B. And if I click on class 2, then I should see section A and B as well. So if we go and check our database, we have section A and B for class 1 and section A and B for class 2. And we don't have any section for class 3. So if I select class 3, then that should be empty. So it is working fine. And okay, we have implemented that dependent drop down. Now what we want to do is, whenever a user selects section A, then I want to filter those students that belong to section A. So we can implement that using the same functionality that we have implemented here. So let's go to our students.blade.php component, and let's wire model it. So I want to wire model selected section. So we haven't defined this property. I'll just copy that and go to our students Livewire component and define a property called selected section, and let's keep it null by default. And now what we can do is, when this selected section is set, so the way we implemented in our selected class, we can copy that, and when this selected section value is set, then we want to run a function, then we want to run the query where the section ID is. So remember, we need to have the section ID and the class ID in the students model. So we are running the query in our student model. So we have the class ID and the section ID in our student model. So we need to have this relation, and the query where the section ID is equal to this selected section. So save that, and we have wire modeled it, and we have also defined the property. Let's go and check our students.blade.php. So we have modeled it with selected section. So everything should work fine now. Let's go and reload our browser. And if I click on class 1, we don't have any students. If I select class 2, then I should see all the students that belong to class 2. And also only the students belong to only section B. So we don't have any student that belong to section A. So if I select section A, then the results should be empty here. And yes, it is working as expected. And if I click on section B, then we should see the values, but we don't get anything here. Class 2, section B. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Wire model selected section, students.php. When this selected section is set, function query where the section ID is this selected section. Class 3, section A. Okay, there's a problem in my database, I think. All right, so there was some problem with my database seeding. So I haven't changed any code here. So what I did was I just reseeded my database, and all the code is exactly same. I haven't changed anything here, and I just reseeded my database. And if I go and reload my browser and select a class, that is class 1, then only the students belonging to class 1 are displayed here, and the pagination is also working fine. So if I remove this, and so we have more than 10 records for class 1. So if I go to next, then only the class 1 students are displayed here. So the pagination is working. And now if I select section A, then we should also only see the students that belongs to class 1 and section A, as you can see here. And if I select section B, then we should only see the students that belongs to class 1 and section B, and all the other functionalities like searching through these filter results. So if I search for KOREY, then only the results belonging after this filtered are returned back. So we have suppose 10 records here. So suppose we have filtered our data using class 1 and section B, and now we have 10 results here. So now if I run the query, then it is gonna search only in these 10 queries, as you can see in our database here. So whenever we are calling this when condition, and then only we are searching the term here. So we can define, you can define how you want to search the model. So I am searching at the end, so we'll be filtering these data and then searching this. So that's how it's working here. So if I type something here, then it is only gonna search through these results and not from the whole database. So I hope you understand the concept. So in this session, we are going to be implementing how we can perform exports using Laravel and Livewire. So suppose I have multiple records here, and when I select these records, then what I want to do is whenever I select all these records and with checked, what I want to do is I want to export these records to an Excel file or any other file that you want to. And in this tutorial, I'm going to be exporting the records to an Excel file. So what I want to implement is, whenever I select these records and click on with check, then I want to show a button of export, and when I click on the button, then I want to show a confirmation dialog that whether the user wants to export these or not, and when he or she clicks on OK, then I want to export these records to an Excel file. So the first step is we need to install a package that is called Laravel Excel. So you can go to this link, so docs.laravel.com, and from there you can check out the documentation so this is the documentation to install this package. Just type in composer require mat website Excel, and this will install the latest version of the package. And now let's check how we can implement the export using Laravel and Livewire on the data tables that we have implemented here. So let's go to our Visual Studio Code, and I want to display a export button here. So let's start with that. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to display an export button. So I'm just going to copy this A tag here and paste that here. So the href, it doesn't really matter, input type of button, and on click I want to show a confirm message whether he or she wants to export these records or not. And when the user clicks on cancel, nothing's gonna happen. And when they click on OK, then we want to execute the function called export selected, and we don't need to pass anything here since we have the wire model property. So we have access to all the property in our component itself, so we don't need to pass anything from here. So let's just save that, and let's also change the value to export. And so we have the export button, we click on OK, we get this confirmation dialog, and when the user clicks on OK, then I want to export it. So how do we do that? The first steps, let's go to the documentation and check out the exports and 5-minute quick start. So here we have the documentation to create the export file. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this command and go and paste that in our terminal. So in our case, the model that we want to export is student model, and I'm going to name our file as students export. Okay, so PHP artisan make export students export, and the model is student. Hit enter, and this is going to create a folder in our app directory, and inside we are going to see the file called students export. So here we have the general code for exporting the students model, so student all, and by default it is using the namespace app/students, so it is giving an error. So let's go to the documentation and check out how we can implement the export functionality. So what we are going to do is we are going to use the function called from query, because what it is going to do is it will help us to build a query. So we'll be using query builder to export our records to an Excel file. So in order to implement the query builder, what we need to do is we need to specify these traits in our students export.php file. I'll just paste that here, and we don't need the from collection, and also let's remove the app/student. We'll be implementing that later, and we don't need the from collection here, and we need to implement the from query. So I'll just copy this and paste that here, and we also need to use the exportable. So this is the trait, so we also need to use this exportable trait, and I'll show you the usage of this in just a moment of time. So we have the collection, and we also don't need this collection function here, so we are going to use the query function here. I'll just copy this and paste that here, and instead of student, instead of invoice, what we want to do is we want to get the student model here, and this is imported as expected. So let's just save that. And what we want to do here, so instead of just returning the invoice query, what we want to do is, I'll just show you the example of what it is actually doing here. So what it is actually doing here is it is receiving the value of year as a constructor and then assigning it to the local variable year, and then it is building the query here. So returning invoice query where year is where year with the value of created at is this year. So in our case, what we want to do is we want to first define a variable here. So protected, and let's name it. So this is gonna be an students array. So protected students, and here what we want to do is students query where key. So the where key is the function that we use in our delete records as well. So we are query building using the query builder and then passing the where key parameter, where key builder, and also we have passed the array here and then performing the delete operation. So this where key builder takes an array of IDs. So similarly we are going to implement that here too. So where key, we need to pass the students array here. Okay, and let's save that. So we don't need anything else here, and we also need to define the constructor. Let's just define that public function construct, and we'll be receiving the students ID, and let's assign that to our students variable that we have defined here. So this students variable is this one. So we are assigning the students array to our local students variable that we have defined here. So this variable, this students variable is going to be set to whatever value that we pass from here. Okay, and then this students array, we are passing it in our query builder. Okay, and now one last step that we need to do is we just need to call this function. As you can see here, now we can download the export. In order to download the export, what we need to do is we just need to run this code. So whenever the user clicks on export and then the user clicks on OK, then we want to execute a function which we haven't defined yet probably. So export selected. So we need to execute this function, and I'm going to define that here. And what we want to do here is we want to return a new students export, and we also need to pass the array here. So array of students IDs. So let's pass this checked array and then download, and let's name it students. Okay, and don't worry about this error. This is just a IntelliFence error here, nothing else. Our syntax is perfectly fine, and now everything should work fine. Okay, let's check out the workflow of what's actually happening here. So whenever the user clicks on OK, then we are going to execute this function export selected. As you can see here, wire click export selected, this function is going to be executed. We are going to come here to our students.php component. Export selected is going to be executed, and it is going to return a new student export, and we are going to pass this checked array. So we have it wire modeled. So this check is going to hold all the arrays that we are selecting in our data table, and so we are going to pass the array to the students export, and then it is going to perform the download operation with the name of students.xlsx Excel file. Okay, so now when we go to the students export, then we are going to receive that value here. So this construct function, we are going to receive that value in our students variable, and then we are assigning that value to our students array that we have defined here. So this is the local variable, and this is the value that we are receiving from our parameter. Okay, so this students variable, we are assigning it to our local variable students. So this is going to be an array now, and then when we are running the query, then what we are doing is we are running the query builder student query, where key is this students array. Okay, so now everything should work fine. I'll just go and reload our browser. And what if I want to export this value of these 4 students? Okay, so I haven't defined anything else here, the formatting of the Excel file, defining the heading, or all the other things like defining the relations and all. Nothing, I haven't defined anything. We'll only see the raw Excel file here, but our Excel should be exported, so it should work fine. So let's see what's going to happen. If I click on with checked and click on export, click on OK, then we should see a file being downloaded here. If everything is working fine, then let's click on OK, and now our file gets downloaded. And let's open and check whether it's working fine. So we have Miss Mariana Simonis, and all these we should generally see the 4 records. So I'll just open it. So as you can see, our Excel file consists of 4 records with the value of 19, 20, 21, and 22, and also the class in section IDs, the address, phone number, email address, everything else is working fine. So I hope you understand how we are implementing this feature with the help of Laravel and Livewire. And if you don't understand anything, you can probably make a comment and I'll try to explain it to you. All right, we are back again, and a viewer of my video requested a feature to implement a checkbox to select all the records of the data table, and I am here with that feature. And what I want to implement here in this session is that I want to show a checkbox here, and when the user clicks on it, then we'll be selecting all of the records that are displayed on this page, and then show a message that you are currently selecting this number of items, and do you want to select all? And when the user clicks on select all, then we want to select all of the records, the total records from our data table. Okay, so we'll be implementing that in this session, and if you are ready, then let's get started. So now let's go to our Visual Studio Code, and we have a checkbox here in our, so this is the input type of checkbox, and let's wire model this with a property which we will be calling as select page, which we haven't defined yet. So let's go ahead and copy that and go to our students.php and define a property called select page, which will be false by default, and we'll be using the lifecycle property, lifecycle hook of this select page. So whenever this value updates, then what we want to do is let's first dump it. So public updated select page, and then we'll be receiving the value that will be either true or false. And let's go ahead and dump that value. And now if you go ahead and reload our browser, and if I go ahead and select this box, then we should see a dump value of true, and that didn't work. Why that didn't work? Select page. Okay, I didn't save this. I need to save that. Now reload our browser and we should see that. Okay, so we get a value of true, and when unselected we get a value of false. So now let's go to our students.php, and since we have the select page, then what I want to do here is, if the value is true, then I want to execute a query, and if the value is false, then I want to assign the checked array to an empty array. That is, we want to empty all of the records that are checked. And if the value is 2, then what I want to do here is I want to select all of the records that are displayed on this page. Okay, so all of these 10 records should be selected when I click on this button. So how do we do that? So for that, what we need to do is we need to define a computed property. So the way we define a computed property is by calling a function. Okay, it's by defining a function. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extract this all queries. The student query that we are the query that which we are using to get all the students, and along with the paginate, I'm just gonna cut this part and then define a computed property for this query. So public function get students property. Okay, and it needs to return this query. So save that. And so this is the computer property, and we'll be calling this by the student's name here. So get and the property are the convention, naming convention for the computer property. And what we can now do is we can directly call this students, and everything should work as usual since we are using the computer property. Okay, so everything is working fine, and the pagination and the filtration on filtering property and all, everything is working fine. And now what we can do is, if the value is checked, then what I want to do is I want to assign the checked array to this students, and I want to plug the ID from that collection. So this is going to give an error since this will return a collection. So this students is a query builder, and then we are plugging the ID. So this is going to return a collection, Laravel collection, but we are assigning it to an array, and we are also using this array in our isChecked method here. So we are checking whether in our array we have this ID and then passing the array here. So this is the type of array, and we are assigning it to a collection here. So this will give an error. So let's go ahead and check that error. What kind of error do we get here? And then we'll be fixing it later. So if I click on select all, then I get an error that in array expects parameter to be an array and given is object. So what it basically did was it executed this function. So it is checked function is executed, and it checks whether in array we have student ID, and this has to be an array, but now this became a collection, and that's why it gave an error. So in order to change that collection to an array, what we need to do is we need to map each of the item, and we need to pass the function first. So we need to pass a function and map each of the item to a type of string. Okay, first what we can do is let's just do one thing. Let's convert that to an array. We can directly convert that to an array. So since we are plugging the ID, and to array will generally convert this collection to an array. So this will work when we select all of the items, but we'll get another error that I'll be showing you. What type of error do we get? So if I click on select all, then all of the 10 records that are displayed here are checked. But if I try to uncheck any one of these, then we get an unusual behavior. As you can see, we can't unselect any of these. So in order to fix this error, what we need to do is we need to map each of the value, and in order to map it, what we need to do is we need to pass a function, and we want to map each of the item to a type of string. So now so this function is basically doing is each of the IDs from our students array will be mapped to a type of string. Okay, and then we finally convert that to an array. So let's save that, and let's go ahead and reload our browser. And now if I click on this select box, then all of the items are displayed on this page are now selected. And if I click on any one of these items, then we get the usual behavior that actually should be like, and our error is now solved. And what I also want to do is, whenever I uncheck any one of these boxes, then what I want to do is I want to disable this button as well. So in order to do that, we need to define one more function, that is updated checked. So whenever the checked array is updated, then what I want to do is I want to assign the select page value to false. Okay, so whenever the checked array is updated, then I want to assign the select page value to false. So now again, we go ahead and reload our browser, and if I select, all of the checkboxes are selected, and if I click on this checkbox, then this should be disabled. Okay, and yes, everything is working as expected. And the next step that I want to do here is, whenever I select this checkbox, then I want to show a message here that you have selected this many items, and do you want to select all, and show a button here. And when the user clicks on select all, then I want to select all of the records that we are fetching from our database. Okay, so let's go ahead and implement that as well. So first step, let's define a message here, that is, you have selected this many items, and we want to implement that in our students.blade.php, and I'll be displaying that message here. So let's define a div with a class of call md10. Okay, and now let's define a message, you have selected. So first I'll define the markup, and then we'll be looking at the logic of how we can implement this. So you have selected 10 items. Do you want to select all? And let's also define one more, that is, let's say we have 500 items, and we want to show the question mark at the end. And let's also define a href tag here, select all, and let's give it a class of margin left of 2. Okay, so now this message should be displayed here. And now again, let's go ahead and reload our browser, and we see that we have this displayed here. Again, let's also define a margin bottom of 2, and everything should work. Everything should look good here. So if I select this checkbox, then I want to display this message, and when I click on select all, then I want to hide this button and also select all of the items that we are fetching from our database. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on the logic. So I want to display this message when our select page property is true. Okay, so if this property is true, then I want to display this message. So let's go ahead and define the logic. So if select page is true, then I want to execute. I want to show this message. So reload our browser, and so now it is not visible. If I click on this, then we see a message that you have selected 10 items. Do you want to select all? And now when I click on select all, then I want to show another message that you have selected this many items, and also hide this button here. So the way we can do that is by, okay, let's define this inside another div. Let's save that, and let's define one more property in our students.php, that is select all. So this value will be true when the user clicks on select all. So all the values are selected. So it indicates that all of the records of our database, of our tables, are selected, and not only this current page. Okay, so when the user clicks on select all, then I want to set the value of select all to true. Okay, So we have a function, so we have a link here, and let's define the wire equal to, then I want to execute a function called select all. So we haven't defined this property yet, so let's go ahead and define that here. So function and then select all. Then what I want to do here is I want to set this select all to true, and okay, and I want to display this message if the select all value is not true. Okay, so I'll just define that later. What I want to do is I'll just copy this part, and when the select all value is true, then I want to show another message, that is you have selected all maybe 500 items, and then I don't want to show this message. Okay, so this should work fine. So now I want to show this message if select all property is true, and I want to show this message if select all property is false. So we can keep that here, and if select all property is true, then I want to show this message, otherwise I want to show this message. So I hope you understand the logic here. So if select all property is set to true, then we'll be displaying this message, and if that is false, then we'll be displaying this message. And we have another parent if condition here. So this all of this message, this whole div will be displayed if only the select page property is true. So now let's go ahead and reload our browser. And we have already defined the logic here. So we have a function, so we have defined the wire click select all, and when this function is executed, then we set the select all value to true. Okay, so we have that. So now let's go ahead and reload our browser, and if I click on this checkbox, then we see a message that you have selected 10 items. Do you want to select all 500? Okay, so the logic here is currently the select page value is set to true and select all is set to false. And so if select page is set to true, then we see this div, and select all is set to false. That means this function is not executed, so this message is displayed here. And now if we click on this select all function, then in return what it's going to do is it will go and execute this function, and what it's going to do is it will set the select all value to true. So when this select all value is set to true, then this function, this condition will be true, and we should see this message. Okay, so when I click on select all, then we see that you have selected all 500 items. Okay, so the logic of displaying the message depending on the user interaction is now working fine. And what I want to do here is you have selected, okay, I want to show the count of the checked array here, and do you want to select all, and this value will be the students total value. So this is the pagination property we get with the Laravel. So since we are paginating the records, this will show the count of the records that we are fetching from the database. Okay, so let's go ahead and again check it once more. So if I select this, then we see that you have selected 10 items. Do you want to select all 38? And then we see a message that if I click on select all, then you have selected all 500 items. So I need to change that as well. So I can just copy this and paste that here. So this should work fine. And one last step that we need to do is when we click on select all, so when we click on select all, then what I want to do is I want to select all of the items that we are querying from the database, and not only this page, but all of the pages. As you can see here, we are only selecting 10 items from this page, And if I go and check the next page, then we don't have the record selected. So when the user clicks on select all, then we should select all of the values. So basically what we will be doing here is we'll be setting the checked array. We'll be putting all of the IDs in our checked array. So we'll be assigning our checked array with all of the records from our database. So how do we do that? So in order to implement that, what we need to do is we need to, once again, since we are paginating this property here, so it is basically fetching 10 records at a time. So by default it is fetching 10 records at a time. So since we are paginating it, what we need to do is we need to separate out our query into another computed property. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this part and define one more function here that will be, okay, let's define that here. The function get students query property. So this should be property, and what we want to do here is we want to return this query. So before the pagination, so this is actually in the form of the query builder here. So we are not paginating these results. So these are all the records that we are fetching from the database before the pagination actually is done here. So now when we call the get students property, then we will be paginating the results. So return students query and then paginate the results. Okay, we need to assign this students query and then we should paginate it. Okay, now everything should work as before. As you can see, it is working as expected, and if I select all, then we get all the selected items, and when I click on select all, then we have selected 38 items. So now what we can do is, since we have separated our query into another get property, now what we could do is when I click on, okay, where's that function? So when I click on select all, then what we are doing here is we are selecting all of the, then we are assigning the select all property to true. And then we also want to assign our checked array to all of the IDs from our database. So now what we can do is we can actually call this property here. So get students query property. So this is returning all of the records before the pagination is actually happening. So this is recording all of the records from our database before the pagination occurs. So after this, so the get students property is actually paginating the results, but the students query property is only building the query here without performing the pagination. So what I can do here is I can assign this students query, and then like we did here in our, so like since we are assigning the checked array to the get this students and then plugging the ID, then I can actually copy this whole part and then assign it here. So we are accessing the students query computed property and then plugging the ID and then mapping each of the ID from the students query to a string and then converting that to an array. So I hope you understand the logic here. We have only separated the query into two parts. One is the get students property and another is get students query property. So query property will be returning all of the students from our database without the pagination. The students is only is gonna return the students query along with the pagination. Okay, so we are assigning the pagination later, and when the user clicks on the select page, so when the select page value changes and if that value is true, then we are assigning the checked array to the students computed property and not the students query computed property. So this is returning the paginated results, and when the user clicks on select all, then what we are doing is we are assigning the checked array to the students query. So this is without the pagination, and then we are performing the plugging the IDs and then mapping each function to each item to a string and then converting that to an array. So the reason we are converting that to an array is because since we are checking here whether in our array we have this student ID. So in array expects parameter first to be a key and then the second. So in array, expects parameter first to be a value of the array, and the second parameter has to be an array. So this has to be an array, and that's why we are converting our checked property to an array here. So the reason behind that conversion is to convert that to an array. So this has to be an array. Okay, so our logic, everything is working fine here. So now let's go ahead and try it once more. So when I click on select all, then I see a message that you have selected 10 items. Do you want to select all 38? And when I click on select all, then we can see that we have you have selected all 38 items, and we also can see that we have an array of which check 38, and we have the message delete and export. So now we can delete all of the items, or we can also export all of the items. And yes, that's how we can actually implement selecting multiple items, selecting all of the items from our data table, or selecting only a part of the items from the database. And we can also do is, since we are querying the results after the page along with the search results here. So as you can see here, so student with the class and section, and when this selected class is true, then we are running this query, and when this selected section is true, then we are running this query, and then also performing this search here. So now if I go ahead and, okay, let's filter it instead of searching. So I want to filter it by section A, and now we have these values here. Okay, we don't get any value of class 2, so we are filtering them by class 1. And as you can see, we see that we have multiple results here. So since we are getting 18 results, now if I go ahead and select this, then we are selecting only 10 items. And do you want to select all 18? Yes, then we are currently selecting 18 items, and we can also double check that. And now what I want to do is I want to delete all of these. So if I go ahead and delete it, then we shouldn't see any record from class 1 in our data table. So all of the values from the class 1 should be deleted. So let's go ahead and delete it, and all of these values were deleted. So once these values are deleted, then what I want to do is I want to assign the select all property to false, and then also select page property to false. Okay, so this is the final thing that we want to do here. So when we assign this checked to an empty array, then what I want to do is I also want to set the select all property to false, and I also want to set the select page property to false as well. So again, let's go ahead and reload our browser, and everything should work. Okay, we only have class 2 section A and B. So now if I go ahead and filter it by class 2 section A, we don't get any results. Okay, we are going to page 2. So class 2 section A. Okay, so since we are getting the 10 records here, so if I go ahead and select all, and you are currently selecting 10 items, do you want to select all 10? Okay, that's fine. Select all, then you are currently selecting all 10 items. Now if I go ahead and delete that, and we should see this message disappear, and this checkbox should also be disabled. Okay, so if I click on OK, then selected records were deleted successfully. And since we have the applied filter here, so now if I go ahead and revert back, then we see all of these records. So our pagination, filtering property, and bulk delete, everything is working. So I hope that you like the video. And okay, one more thing that I want to show here is when I click on these values, so we have a small bug here. So if I am selecting multiple values here, and while the user is selecting all of these 4 records, what if they go ahead and delete a single item from here? So when the user clicks on OK, then notice the bug here. Since we are selecting 4 items, and when I click on this, then what's actually happening is we are currently selecting 3 items, but we see a message, we see the count of 4 here. So that's a small bug which I want to fix here. So we actually have multiple solutions for this problem. So one of the solutions could be when the user is selecting the multiple items from here. So when the user selects these checkboxes, then what we could do is we could actually hide this delete button. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have in our students.php, blade.php, we are deleting that button here. Okay. So what I want to do here is if the checked array is set, okay, if the checked array is not set, then I want to show this button, otherwise I want to hide that. So if this is not, so if this is null, then we'll be showing that, and if it consists of only a single value or more than that, then I want to hide this button. Okay, so if we go ahead and reload our browser, and when I click on select, then our button gets disappeared. So this is one of the way that we can implement this. So this way the user cannot delete the items and we won't see that error, and when I unselect all of these, then we see that button again. So this is one of the ways, and the other way that we can implement this is by going to our students.php, and since we are deleting when we delete a single record from the database, then what I want to do is I want to delete that ID from our checked array as well. So that could be another solution for this. So let's go ahead and do that, and the way we can do that is by calling a function called array diff, and I also checked that on the internet. I didn't knew about this syntax here, so I just opened up Stack Overflow, and so array without the strawberries value will be array diff, and this takes the array and another value with an array of the key that we want to delete. Okay, so we should pass here this checked and another array with the value of our student's ID. So since we are deleting this student ID, so since we are deleting the record from our data, since we are deleting this student's ID's record from our database, so when we delete this record, then what I want to do is I want to remove that ID from our checked array as well. Okay, so and the way we can do that is by calling this function array diff, and this takes the first parameter as the array itself from where we want to remove and the value that we want to remove. So we are actually specifying the student ID that we want to remove, and this result gets assigned to our this checked array. Okay, so this should work. So let's go ahead and reload our browser, and now if I select multiple items here, so now multiple items, and we have with checked with the value of 4, and when I delete a single record, then we should see the value of this to be increased by 1. Okay, so I click on OK, then as you can see, the with checked array consists of 3 items only, and that's how we fix the error. Anything else? We don't have anything else, I think. Okay, so in this tutorial series, we implemented multiple features that we could implement on a data table, like the pagination feature, the filtering feature, multi-level filtering, like filtering by class, filtering by section. So you can actually implement this functionality on multiple other use cases as well. Searching the tables, so searching through multiple columns and searching through relations, deleting single records, deleting multiple records, and exporting the data to an Excel file using the package Laravel Excel, and also deleting these records and a bunch of features. So it was a very lengthy series, or as you can see, we implemented quite a lot of features which you don't really find on the internet. And I hope you like the content, and if you do like it, then like the video and do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay subscribed for the future releases. So I'll be also be posting some more tutorials related to Livewire, and also maybe I'll also be posting some real projects using Livewire in the future. So stay tuned for that, and have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.